Good everyone and welcome to another vlog for the Exodus 7 to 12 KJV project. As you can see, we are on the font and it is finished. Yes! So just to give you a quick demo of how this little font works. It works like any other font, except for the fact that this one you can write vertically as well as horizontally without any issue, except let me just move this down and center it like that. There are some big symbols that doesn't quite work. It works, some work horizontally and others work vertically only. Now all you need to do is just reduce the line space, just like that. And there you have a vertical thing. Very cool. So anyway, that's just the font. The way I color it is just by using a node texture, which I'm going to show you quickly. Select one here, sorry. Then you go into your nodes. Make sure use nodes is ticked. Press home so that you are centered on it. And then you input a Voronoi texture and you adjust intensity to position. I think it's position. Let me just check. Yes. Change it to position. And then you just add a color ramp to that, setting it to constant. And you use the basic 4 shades that you really want to see in your final result. And there you have it. And then as you switch to your, let's just make this global. And then if you look at the font, and let's set that to be shadeless. There you go. And that's pretty much all there is to it, to using this little font right here. But I want to show you what it looks like in an actual scene for a wall, a hieroglyphic wall or pillar or whatever you want to apply it to. As you can see, all these are movable, just like that. So they're just off the surface. I'm just going to see if I can rotate it enough. No, the curves are in the way. But as you can see, this is just the font. Now what I do is I just typed out a nice little message or whatever. Something like God is good, or Moses and Aaron standing before Pharaoh, that sort of thing. And after that, removing the symbols that are doubles. Because in English you have, for example, the E repeating a lot. And when you look at hieroglyphics, you rarely see regular repetition. You do see repetition. I mean, it's the language. You do say the same things over and over again. But for example, if I would notice something like these two repeating, I would go in and change it to be like a T, or if I see there are too many big sun logos or icons, I would change this to be a U or a Q. Let's go for U in this case. You just exchange what looks to be a lot more regular for something that's a little bit more irregular. I didn't just do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I also did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a few of the regular signs and symbols that you would use in the regular Latin alphabet. So this is pretty much the basic setup for any kind of hieroglyphics that are going to be used in the Exodus project. It's a very simple yet very effective setup. I'm going to be showing you what this looks like on actual buildings for the project. So let's quickly switch over to that. And this is the building so far. Not something to write home about, I would say. but there is still a lot of work that needs to be finished. For example, let me just increase the size here. I want to zoom in on the pillar so I can show you guys what that looks like. Oh yeah. And see, just like I told you guys, it's simply setting up the scene, rendering it out, and bringing it back onto different objects and scenes. And yeah. Now you have to remember that hieroglyphics are pretty much always some form of relief work. So you have to add some level of normal influence if you do make hieroglyphics. But I'm very satisfied with this. I really like the result. I'm still not sure what to do with the tops of the pillars, whether they have to be green or blue or purple or whatever. At the moment, they're just black and white. I do know a lot of Egypt was plastered and sort of whitewashed in a way. So it really was a lot of white with a lot of color on it, like you can see with the hieroglyphics. But I don't know how much was white and how much was not. I really don't. It's very much part of the creative process when you're making stuff like this, because you don't always, I mean, some people get the privilege of getting to see things from the past and, you know, hidden things that have been that we can't see. I've asked God to show me that, but so far hasn't been what He has allowed me to do. And I think it's because of the clarity and cost principle, which I spoke about in a previous vlog. But getting back on point though, you just have to be creative when you're creating stuff that you really don't have access to the original stuff. So this is just one of the opening chords. Still a lot to do. The flickering you see over here is from the shape that causes the particles to actually emit. I did see that there's another shape over here that's causing problems. Don't exactly know what that is, but oh, it's one of the wall structures. Okay. Let me just check that. Yeah, it's one of the wall structures. You can see there's a little entrance over there. So I can actually just delete that because there is no further wall here. It's pillars on both sides. So I can actually just get rid of that. Okay. One thing that God showed me with this is that you need to, if you use a group as your emission objects, you need to make sure that you have an even number. This works with an even number. So as you can see, I have 2 extra over here. The problem is when you don't use groups, the computer places them properly. Blender places them on individual vertices. But if you don't use just a single object and you use groups, it double places one. Let me show you what I mean. There we go. See, that's what happens. You have a double pillar. Now, this doesn't happen when you fix the shape or you switch the shape back, like I just did. This happens only when you do it the first time. If you change the seed value, it's not the solution. So using an even number and putting some vertices after you have finished your shape below everything so that it will create an extra shape, but it won't be visible to the camera. It's just a quick particle tip there. It's not a consistent thing. This is kind of working around a weird issue with the particle system. So if it behaves correctly when you use groups, don't worry about adding extra vertices and stuff to get rid of those extra pillars. If it works right, just leave it. Let's get to the characters. As you can see, this week has been quite productive. We have our 3 advisors, which can still get a little bit more adjustment in terms of their faces, just so that they're a little bit different. I can also do a little bit more sculpting on the outfits. I still need to make sure that their faces are properly rigged and that I can only use the object properties on the body object itself to adjust the expressions and emotions, because they will react to what happens in the throne room, even his air conditioners. So let me show you another servant. So this is just a female servant that's already correctly rigged. As you can see, her face has expression to it. So it's quite a fun project. However, I do say that I do feel her head is a little bit small for her body. It looks that way. I measured it out. You can fit 8 of her head, in the span of her body from top to bottom. So it is technically correct, but her head still looks too small. I think it's because of the sharp chin, but And here we have the other servant. As you can see, I keep the same basic workwear because they do need to be active the whole day, so I would prefer that they would actually have something that's practical. Now, by just judging the shape, you would know that I would need an alpha texture to make this thing practical. But that's not the reason I'm showing you guys this one. The reason I'm showing you guys this is because of this function. I do think that the tops of the actual feathers would be a little bit more flexible than these, but I do know that feathers tend to hold their shape if they're not overly stretched, like this. So these are just really low resolution feather shapes. Just want to show you that I actually have subdivision on them. See? Nothing too fancy. It keeps manipulating the shape easier because the shapes get manipulated by the slow parent before they're subdivided. I would like to show you this in an active scene. So what I did last night is I animated one of the servants with the fans. I'm talking about the eyes, the mouth, the hands, the fan, and even added like a tile floor and background. So that is exactly what he would be doing in the final as well. The only thing I'm a little disappointed is the fact that when he moves, the sharp point that would be in the skirt is kind of lost because I have to put his legs apart so that he stands firmly when he uses the fan. Now there's a little compositing trick here. Because I wanted the background to be darker than the foreground because it was really distracting. But as you know, the shape of the fan is not according to the feather shape. And because it's not according to the feather shape, when you try to use something like the Z-Pass or any form of ID mask, it's only going to give you the shape of the object, not the shape of the texture. So what I got was this weird looking bubble shape around the fan itself. So there's a very cool trick to get around that. I'm going to show you quickly. This is our scene. So you can see that it still moves and it looks like everything is in the same scene. And it is, but it's not on the same render layer. And that's where the trick comes in. Okay. Now the only way to get around the problem is by getting everything that could potentially be behind this fan out of its way. And the only way to do that is to use your alpha as your background. See? And they have a very clean mask. Very, very clean. The only downside to this comes when you try to integrate everything and you can't really integrate it properly because of situations like that. See what happens to the focus when it meets the floor. So these are just little details that you can decide on just letting go. You don't have to, get it like absolutely perfect. But going for as good as possible is definitely encouraged. But you probably wouldn't have noticed that unless I told you about it. Now, and I know some of you would have, but yeah. I want to talk to you guys about this as well. Now, you see I used a hieroglyphic symbol on the fan itself. I do know that, for example, King Tut's fan was absolutely covered in symbols. After doing a little bit of research, I found that you can have it full of logos. You can have it without, not logos, hieroglyphics. You can have it with no hieroglyphics. You can have it with a single feather. You can have it with lots of feathers. Now, for something visual, you would probably go for something that has a lot more feathers, like I did in this case. But there is a problem with freestyle, because freestyle does not acknowledge your textures. So what I did, which God is absolutely brilliant, is when I made the texture for the hieroglyphics, I wanted the indentation to look very molded. So it's going to have very smooth ridges. You can see it's a very soft and fuzzy looking texture. This enables us to use the fuzzy area as an outline, just like that. You can see that the color ramp is set to make the inside white, give us our outline, make the rest white as well. This is just multiplied. And of course, this one just affects a little bit of the color by multiplying it and getting it a little bit darker. And of course, affecting the normal, also multiplied. And finally, adding a little bit of a reflection thing just to give that metallic feel to it. So if you were to look at this like really, really close up, the fan moving, you would see this. I know this is just going a little bit fast, but as you can see, the feathers don't have really fine detail moving. It's just moving a little bit. But let me just get a clean frame. There we go. Now you can see the outlines and the slight darker color. You can add color to this sort of thing. It's not really necessary, but you can. And the fan texture itself was hand painted in GIMP. I'm one of those people who are kind of overboard in general about using procedural textures, but it's just not practical in this case, at least not as far as I know. So what I did is I hand painted a normal texture, and of course the texture that would influence the color. I used the color ramp. So just for the sake of showing you guys who are interested in that sort of thing, this is what the texture looks like. This one affects the normal influence, just to get that sense of depth with the shadows and all that kind of stuff on the surface. This is my UV layout. And this is the one that would affect the color. As you can see, it's not a very high resolution texture, but it doesn't need to be because the fan is like an extra. You want to give the computer as much memory as possible to deal with particles and all sorts of other stuff. Okay, now one thing I didn't talk to you guys just yet about is the fact that I know some of you are probably wondering how in the world do you get one character or one person to hold something like this and actually move it. And just so you show you guys, he's not actually hitting his face, just in case you were wondering. See? It's just the angle. Now, the way you get a character to hold onto something is by, first of all, tying an empty to your object by parenting it. And then you use constraints to tie your hand objects, now this works for inverse kinetics, to tie your hands to your empty that has been parented to your shape. So let me give you a quick example of what that looks like. Let's say we have a cube. I don't know, let's just say that we want the foot to move the cube. Okay. So what we would need to do is we would need to get an empty. Something that won't show up, and then we would parent this to the cube. Okay, just like that. Now we can move the cube over to where the foot is at. Say, we just need to check the point of the foot. Okay, it's right there. So we need to move the cube just a little bit over so the empty is nice and in the middle. And you can see the empty needs to be moved quite a bit. I think it might be too high as well. Yeah, it's too high. So just take that down. Okay, so let's say the foot needs to move the cube. So what we're going to do is we're going to bind this foot controller that moves the foot. We're going to bind it to the empty over here by using bone constraints. Say copy location, get the empty, and copy rotation, and get the empty. Now what I did before was I tried using location offset and rotation offset, but you get really weird results. It's not as consistent as you would like it to be. So what you need to do is you need to tie it, and then you need to rotate your empty to fit the rotation of your foot. There we go. Now instead of moving your foot to move your object, because for example we have two connection points over here, you cannot move one to move the other unless you know how to rig it that way. I don't. We are going to be moving our cube. So when we move our cube, this is what happens. So in the case of the fan, it would be just adding another empty. There's my empty, there it is. Parenting that to the cube as well. Let me just go get my empty again. Move it to the other foot. Let's get it nice and centered on that heel. Something like that. And of course we tie the foot to the heel. The empty. The foot to the heel, yeah. I'm going to tie that foot to that heel. And rotation. Okay. There we go. All it took was rotating at 180 degrees on the x-axis. So like I said before, now all you need to do is just move your actual shape. See, just like the fan. It needs to be just a little bit higher. Okay. Just like the fan. Oh yeah. So you can use this for steering wheels, you can use this for all manner of stuff. And if you wanted to get the hands or feet to do something different while still parented to the object, you can just turn off influence. See? Because it's keyframeable, you can reduce the influence. And let's say you're doing a driver, you know, the hand can go off the steering wheel and change gears and then come back to the steering wheel. So it's as simple as animating this. Changing gears, back on the steering wheel. Changing gears, back on the steering wheel. gears, steering wheel, gears, steering wheel. It's a very simple way of rigging something that would ordinarily take a little bit more effort. But it's a tip for you guys. So I really hope it's useful. And that's it for this vlog. Thankfully, it's a very short one with a lot of progress. Have a great one and God bless you.